Hi guys, welcome to the J&J Boxing Podcast. I'm here with Jordan Henderson. We're going to talk about the remainder of the fights on the big card happening in the 23rd of December. So let's kickstart this video. We're going to talk about Dubois versus Miller, which I think, as a neutral, I think that's the closest fight, 50-50, that both men can win. So what's your thoughts on the fight?
Jarrell, Big Baby Miller versus Daniel Triple D. Dubois, well, for me, like I'm in two minds here. I'm looking at this fight and I'm thinking, part of me's thinking, Ryan's on the wall for Daniel Dubois. You got a pressure fighter against someone who's quit twice and wanted to maybe quit another time. That's Ryan's on the wall. But then the other half of me is saying, this is a 1 or 2 round job for Daniel Dubois. And that's what makes this fight absolutely fascinating. And I'm thinking, Daniel Dubois, people criticize him, but one thing he does do is he punches through the target. He punches very crisp. He is a prolific puncher, and it's very technically correct. It's like very amateur schooled. And then you got Jarrell Miller, he has a defensive understanding. Like you see him shoulder rolling, you see him moving his head, you see him putting the high guard up. But the problem is his reaction times are so slow that it makes no difference. This guy gets caught for fun. So when I put this into my little calculator in my brain, correct punching, power, timing, crisp, someone who's got slow reaction times and getting caught, I'm thinking, yeah, this is a 1 or 2 round job. But then I look at, if Jarrell Miller can take the punches and he has that precious style, Daniel Dubois' history of quitting, he's going to take him into deep waters and drown him. So for me, this whole fight depends on Jarrell Miller's chin. Like the whole fight depends on the guy's chin.
Yeah.
If he got the whiskers, then he's winning. If he don't, then he won't. Like I think it's, for me, I could almost end the video or end that video with that, like, or end this topic with that. But what are your thoughts anyway?
So I'm going into the fight with my prediction based off Miller's last 2 combat fights. He's looked slow, sloppy, extremely hittable. And Dubois, although he's a very crude boxer, one thing he has got is power and can deliver those punches good. He's not flashy, he's not fast, but can punch correct. Okay, let's just say it like this. If Joe Miller was still on the juice, I would think this is a very competitive fight, and I think this would be a stylistic nightmare for Dubois. I'm basing Jarrell Miller off the last 2 fights I've seen, and I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm just gonna say it straight. I think Dubois is gonna win inside 4 rounds. I think Miller's extremely hittable. I think a lot of people are basing Miller off the pre-2019 Miller. They haven't actually watched the Bracamonte fight. They actually haven't watched the Lucas Brown fight, and it's very concerning the way these lot are hitting Joe Miller. Joe Miller's always been a big guy, but there's a difference between being a big guy carrying muscle and a bit of fat. In his last 2 fights, Joe Miller was just fat, like plain fat. There was no muscle, he was just plain fat. Couldn't actually throw punches properly just because he wasn't mechanically viable to do it, just because he was so big. So if Dubois got anything about him and that same Joe Miller turns up, this should be light work. Light work for Dubois. So that's what I'm basing my prediction off. But this is just me talking of the Miller I've seen in the last 2 fights. If the Miller I've seen that fought Gerald Washington, Bogdan Dinu, Johan Dupa, that's when I think it'll be a much more interesting fight, because with Dubois, you can see that this guy doesn't have the dog in him. It's not even a dig at Dubois. Like, I can't really say anything. I'm not a boxer, but if you're quitting from taking a jab from a cruiserweight, I know Usyk's a heavyweight, but let's just go with the narrative, yeah. Then you in a world of trouble when a 315-pound man is throwing non-stop punches at you. So I'm gonna go out there and be like, I think Dubois wins inside 4 rounds, as I've not seen Miller at his best.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there, because since Jarrell Miller has come back, since his issues, he's not looked the same. He's just not. And this is what happens to many fighters. They have their issues, like Alexander Povetkin. They come back and they're just not the same fighter. looking at Povetkin's physique against Johan Duopa, or even Luis Ortiz. When I saw Luis Ortiz against Deontay Wilder
That
in the
wasn't the
first
same guy that
fight,
fought Brian Jennings.
yeah, that's why I said to myself, this ain't the same guy.
Yeah,
So Jarrell Miller seems has followed that trend.
yeah.
Looks sluggish. Physique doesn't look as good. He's put on weight, and he looks slower. He's been getting buzzed, and yeah, I mean, I think that this isn't the same Jarrell Miller. The question is, has he got enough? The question also is he a clean fighter right now as we speak? I heard that the drug testing over there, I don't hold me to it. I don't know if it's true, but I heard that it's not as strict. I don't know. That's just what I've heard. I'm not saying 100% concrete. I'm not trying to receive papers in the mail. But I've heard that it's not as strict. But the question, the point I'm making is this guy clean? Um, but either way, I think this is the first fight where we're gonna be in disagreement. I'm gonna go with Jarrell Miller
Okay.
by
Yeah.
late stoppage.
Okay.
But as you know, like part of me is saying what you said. It's just that I feel that if Jarrell Miller can, but then when I say it now, I'm thinking, like
That's why the fight for neutral is the best fight on the card, just because you can see both guys concrete winning it. So this is what makes the fight interesting. So yeah, like okay, this is the first prediction that we've done that we're in disagreement. You're saying Miller by stoppage, I'm saying Dubois early, so it's completely different. So one of us is gonna be right, but both our points make sense. Like we've seen Dubois quit, we've seen him fold under pressure, but also we've seen Miller get hit, get buzzed, not go life and death, but have a tough fight with a 45-year-old Lucas Brown. So this is an interesting fight. It's like this is loser leaves town, really. I think the losers is never gonna get to the summit of a division and potentially could be used as an opponent, especially in Jerome Miller's case, as he's 35. So this is an important fight for both, to be honest with you. I also feel like Frank Warren's had enough of Dubois. I kind of feel, I kind of feel that vibe. I'm not sure if you knew, but it was actually agreed in this card that Deontay Wilder's going to fight Daniel Dubois. Frank Warren confirmed that. I showed you the video where he said that. So I've got the feeling that Frank Warren's throwing this fight to be like, okay, if Dubois wins, we'll keep him on. If not, he hasn't got a future with me. So this is a must-win fight for Dubois and Don Charles also, who his fight had a setback last week as well.
Yeah, honestly, like Daniel Dubois, Frank Warren has done things for him that many promoters wouldn't do. I clearly remember the when him and Joyce were squaring off and having their fight. Dan Frank Warren was sitting on the
Sitting on
other
Dubois'
side of his
side,
own
yeah, yeah,
fighter,
yeah,
Joe Joyce, and he's like saying, "No, your guy is not going to win." It's like, what do you mean, your guy? The guy that you're saying is not going to win is signed to your stable. Like he's
yeah,
one of your fighters, and you're standing there saying he's not going to win. And then it's like, also, I remember Daniel Dubois. He lost the fight, but he ended up getting a title shot before Joyce.
yeah.
And I clearly remember the post fight, man, when Daniel Dubois lost. Frank Warren standing there saying, "Oh well, it's only because of the eye. Like if it wasn't, well, who caused the damage to the eye?"
Exactly. Who
Like,
caused the damage to the eye? It wasn't, yeah. So
so
let's
he's
see, let's see about this fight. I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, I'm going to be there. I don't normally go to all the fights on the undercard, but this is going to be the first undercard. I'm going to be there from fight one. So I am really looking forward to that. Me as
yeah,
well,
man.
I don't like Miller, not even just because of the drug thing, just because he tries to intimidate people. It just doesn't work. I see him as a big dummy, and I just don't want this guy to have an opportunity.
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention, as well as like Frank Warren, like the point I was kind of making is he has a real soft spot for Dubois and he's done things he wouldn't do for other fighters. But
Yeah,
like with regards to, I mean, Willie, I know it's out there, but it kind of a bit different. But Willie Hutchinson, I believe, one of his other prospects, lost to a guy he wasn't supposed to lose to. He was
Yeah.
highly touted. You don't really hear from him. Now all these other guys people throw to the wall. Frank Warren is stuck by his man, and it's I think, but I think now it's just no longer viable. So now he's
He
kind
was
of like
supposed to
saying,
be Dubois was supposed to be Frank Warren's answer to Eddie Hearn's Joshua. That was
yeah,
how they were marketing him. A lot of fans bought into it. And when he was on the ascendance, Joshua took his first loss. So they were kind of like building towards a fight. Then that Joyce fight really derailed Dubois, really derailed him. I think that was the worst way. If he lost on points or got stopped, it's understandable. Joyce is the more experienced fighter, but it's the way he lost. So it's like you can't really come back from that. You quit against Usyk as well. It's just like you can't be doing that. Dubois strikes me as someone that's been forced to box by his family. I've seen the dynamic between him and certain people, and it just looks like he's been forced to do it. So not going into fighters' personal lives, but with Dubois, I don't think he has the passion for boxing. I just think he's good at it, so he does it.
yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm not picking Miller with any confidence whatsoever. I think that I will know within the first 3 rounds who's going to win this
Who's gonna
fight.
win this fight? Yeah,
You know,
really, really, really.
so that's what makes it so interesting. I just see if Miller can survive and keep marching forward, I can see him forcing a quit out of Dubois. Dubois, has he ever really been hurt like when he loses? Nah, I don't think. I mean, well,
Nah,
the eye
like
was hurting, but it wasn't like
I've
the
never seen him stumble around the ring like he's just been smashed. Like Usyk, I know Dubois' back leg gave out, but he wasn't seriously hurt. Joyce, he wasn't hurt. I've seen him more hurt in the Lorena fight and the Lati fight than the two losses, but that's a worrying sign. Like if you're quitting when you've not been hurt, imagine what it's gonna be like when you've been hurt. So that is really a interesting point. So like I say, we got to see. I'm like I said, I'm not really picking Dubois with a lot of confidence, but I'm just going based of what I've seen. So yeah,
yeah. Yeah, I hear that, and I'm not picking Miller with any confidence either. But I reckon, like, if the just to sort of round off, if I'm wrong, I know how Dubois is going to win, and I think it's early. And if like maybe you tell me how you feel, but maybe if I'm right and you're wrong here, maybe you see Miller drowning him late. So it's I don't know. Is that how you feel? If Miller is to win, it'll be like drowning
if
him late.
Miller's gonna win, he has to come through a storm. Then after 5 rounds, if Dubois gets basic, gets a bit lethargic, I can see Miller drowning him, and Dubois just giving up. Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah. So we're kind of like we're disagreeing, but we're kind of seeing how the other one might be right.
Exactly, yeah.
The other one I'm really interested in, or semi really interested in, is Arsenbet Matmadov and Ejit
Caballero.
Caballero.
Yep.
And the reason I'm interested in it is because Marius Wack was outboxing Matmadov in spots. That's Marius
Yeah.
Wack. Um,
Carlos Takam was doing his thing as well. Like, yeah.
so I know we won't spend too long on the Matmadov one, but I see it as potentially. I mean, there's one. I see one scenario where Matmadov just like we're making all these predictions and summaries and analysis, and Matmadov just goes and wipes him in the round or two, like he did to Erkan Tepe. But then I also see a situation where he's getting out boxed for a bit, and Ajit Caballero's like ducking underneath, riding the punches and peppering him a bit, and then eventually getting stopped. What do you think's happened in this fight?
It's a very interesting fight. I think it's actually a very good matchmaking fight for Makhmudov. I think he's eligible for the European title. I think he's ranked as a Russian fighter, if I'm not too mistaken. So going in the European route is good. It's an interesting fight because if you've not really been following Ajit Caballero, you don't really remember him from the Chisora fight. That's the last time you remember him. I haven't followed him for a long time, but I saw something a couple years ago, and I see him getting rocked by Kevin Johnson. I see him getting rocked by, I think in his last fight, I see him getting on the brink of getting stopped. So this is 2 fights now. He's getting rocked by people he shouldn't be. And although Makhmudov is a crude, very stiff, crude, upright boxer, you can't deny his power. So I can see a scenario when Caballero makes it tricky for Makhmudov, makes him look a bit silly. maybe you'll be thinking, oh, maybe he can nick it on points, but then he lands that right hand and flattens Caballero because Caballero has seemed to be leaky. But it depends. I think maybe he hasn't had the motivation as he's not been fighting higher level opponents. But it'll be interesting to see what Caballero does and Matmadov. If I had to pick, I'm going to go Matmadov by mid-round stoppage after a tricky first 4 or 5 rounds.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And then you got let's move on to Frank Sanchez and Junior Farr. Are you like me seeing this as maybe a boring but definitive win for Sanchez?
Yeah. Although Junior Fall got knocked out by Lucas Brown in the round, Frank Sanchez isn't that type of fighter, isn't that type of puncher. I see this being a very boring, if it's a 10 round fight or 12 round fight, I'm not too sure, but I see this going points, but a definitive win for Frank Sanchez. Bit of a pointless fight, but money has to be made for these guys, I guess. So you'll take whatever. But yeah, I see this being a relatively easy fight for Frank Sanchez. I want to see him step up now. I think all the prospects around him are stepping him up apart from him. So he needs to do something, force a fight.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Which one do you want to talk about next, bro?
Bivol versus Arthur. We can quickly go through that.
Yeah, man. I see Lyndon Arthur limping in the initial press conference, and they're saying, "Are you injured?" He's, "I'll be around fight night." I mean, he had it. He's up against it as it is. So yeah, I'm not too confident in Lyndon Arthur pulling off the upset. What about you?
Like I said, Lyndon Arthur's been that fighter. He's got a very like lethargical style in the ring. Sometimes he fights like he's not bothered, and I think against the top level, you can't do that. On the other hand, Bivol hasn't looked good against people that he should be beating. Against Craig Richard, looks a bit pedestrian. Against Umar Salinov, looked a bit pedestrian. So maybe you never know. A lot of these Eastern European fighters don't really go for the knockout. I think their priority is points. But with Lyndon Arthur, I think all he's got is a jab. But Bivol will have too much, and I see this fight either getting stopped late or a definitive points win for Dimitri Bivol.
Yeah, man, I can see Bivol taking it very easily. But yeah, I think we may see the first Bivol stoppage in a while as well.
Yeah,
Um,
potentially.
and then who else we
We
got?
have Jail Pataya versus Ellis Soro.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
I respect let me see, I don't want to mispronounce Ellis Zorro. Respect to him for taking the fight. I'm not the one going in there with JL Pataya. So as much as I don't rate his chances, I think it's relatively straightforward yourself.
Yeah. I've watched Ellis Soro a couple times now against people like Dex Bellman, who is English level at best, against an Italian fella last time out, and he's looked very pedestrian, like borderline British level. And Jao Pataya absolutely destroyed the last British fighter, who I actually rate more than Ellis Zorro in Jordan Thompson. So I see this fight as a relative easy fight for Jao Pataya. I think he'll smoke him. Also, interesting news: Optag got stripped of his IBF belt as Zorro wasn't in the top 15.
Yeah.
So that's probably, I think that's been talked about more than his actual fight himself, which shows you the level of opponent. Which, to be honest, I don't really have a problem with the IBF stripping him, as I think they're the most strict out of all the governing bodies. But you could have given, it makes no sense on my term though, just because they've ordered you to fight Braders, but Braders isn't ready himself. So it's like, why are you going to strip him? But obviously
Yeah.
they have their favorites. But yeah, I see this as a very easy fight. I think Opataya will be angry as well as he's been stripped. So I don't see what Zora has to keep Opataya off.
Nah, I think that Opata will win this relatively easy. And then the closest fight of them all, the
Yeah.
fight that we need to really break down and probably going to be, two separate opinions and scratching our heads. We have Philip Hergovich versus Mark Demori. What are your thoughts?
Mark Demori by first round knockout. Oh nah, in all seriousness, it's a bit of a disgraceful matchup, let's be real. Hergovich, I know he's not looked good in his last fights, but I'm still not writing him off. I still think he's a huge, huge threat to the division. But the fact that he's fighting Mark Demori, who got blown out in 1 round by a shot David Hayes, speaks levels of where Hergovich's career is going. I know he's an IBF man though, but you could have taken a bit more risk. I think Mark Demori, He even said it himself. He's not going for the points when he's going for a knockout. He's going to swing to the heels and back. Hergovic will catch this guy. Mark Demore is 40 plus years old. It's a pointless fight to talk to you. I've got Philip Hergovic by whenever he wants to. Realistically, you should be getting him out in the first round.
I think what you just said there may even last longer than the fight.
Yeah,
But in all seriousness, yeah, I think Mark Demore, respect to him for getting in there, respect to him for making more money than he's probably ever made. But realistically, he's not gonna get past. I think it ironically may go longer than the David Haye fight because of the styles, but
yeah.
it may go 2 or 3 rounds, but anything other than Philip Hergovic, max 4 rounds is
Even
going to look
four's
bad
being a
on
bit generous. I'm
Hergovic.
not gonna lie. 4 rounds is a bit. You're supposed to be fighting for the title next. You should be getting someone like Demore out in 3 rounds. But yeah, not a competitive fight at all. There's a reason why the fight is first on the card.
Yeah.
But yeah, respect to Demore for taking this fight. Boxing's a dangerous sport, so going in against a puncher, you have to definitely respect it.
Yeah, interestingly, just before we finish off, I watched an interview with Mark Demore. He said that he was not in a good place when he fought David Haye. I'm not saying that would made a difference. He said he didn't care what happened when he went in there, and he alluded to the fact that this time it's different. So I'm not saying that's going to mean he's going to win, but maybe he will go 2 rounds, 3 rounds, possibly even
Well,
four
let's just
rounds.
say this: if he wins, I think that's the biggest heavyweight upset of all time.
Yeah, I think so as well. I don't think it's going to happen, but yeah, it's a bit of car crash TV, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, but either way, that's our coverage for Jarrell, Big Baby Miller, Daniel Dubois, and the rest of the card in the Saudi Arabia Day of Reckoning. Make sure you leave your own thoughts about what you think is going to happen. And make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, hit the notification bell so you get a notification when we make new videos. Check out our other coverage of the card, Joshua versus Wallin, Wilder versus Parker. All of those are available on the channel. And with that, we'll see you on the next video.